But first, it's been a busy couple of days for headlines in federal Labor. And what's happening in Labor deserves our attention because as much as I'm sceptical about individual opinion polls, if you look at the overall trend, they would suggest that Labor could easily form government at the next election, which is due in May. Now, what happens inside opposition always matters because it's hard to have a good government without an effective opposition to keep them on its toes, and eventually oppositions do become governments, which is why whichever party you normally support, you should want the other party to be the best it can be. Last Friday, we learned that in the House of Representatives, Labor might well gain current Senator Kristina Keneally. And today we learned that it would be losing Joel Fitzgibbon. Let me tell you that any political party that loses Fitzgibbon but keeps Keneally is going backwards. Fitzgibbon, one of the very few Labor MPs ever to have run a small business and have worked with his hands, was born and bred in country New South Wales and was the Deputy Mayor of Cessnock before becoming the local MP 25 years back. By contrast, Keneally, a head office favourite, owes every position she's ever had to factional intervention. She was the Sussex Street candidate to knock off Nathan Rees as Labor Premier of New South Wales after Rees tried to break the influence of Joe Tripodi and Eddie Obeid.
I am nobody's puppet. I am nobody's protege. I am nobody's girl.
Well, that turned out well, didn't it? The biggest loss in state Labor history. And then it was a run at federal politics. First imposed on Labor branches in Bennelong by factional backers yet again. She lost out to John Alexander in that by-election. Then given Sam Dastyari's Senate seat when he quit in disgrace. Again, another factional stitch-up in her favour. When she arrived in Canberra, another factional deal saw her get the job as Labor's Deputy Senate Leader. And now, as it's apparent she'll lose out to Deb O'Neill in the Senate race for the #1 spot on the New South Wales Senate ticket, she's now being moved down to the lower house and foisted on the Labor branches in the Western Sydney seat of Fowler, plainly would have preferred someone else. Talk about factional patronage and why. I mean, if you look at her record, you'd be scratching your head as to why she's such a protected Labor species. Worst ever defeat as Premier, as I said, then failing to win Bennelong despite the Turnbull government's unpopularity in a by-election caused by the local member's dual citizenship. Later, as Bill Shorten's campaign spokesman, she had a key role on Bill's bus, helped him lose the unlosable federal election, and now, despite being Senate Deputy Leader, doesn't look like she can win the top spot on the ticket against a mere backbencher, albeit hard-working and well-respected.
Andrew Clennell, my colleague, reports that you were supportive of having the National Executive endorse Kristina Keneally as the #1 Senate candidate. So is this a bit of, a drama that you could have avoided by just backing Keneally to be the #1 on the ticket, as Andrew said you were willing to do?
Well, I, of course, think that the Deputy Senate Leader, if she nominated for the Senate, would be #1 on the ticket. That is something that is a given. Kristina has chosen to nominate, put herself forward to go to the lower house.
No one believes that, Albo. No one believes she would have got the top spot if she'd nominated. Hence this whole manufactured move to the seat of Fowler, where locals don't know her, she doesn't know them, and they're not happy about a Northern Beaches blow-in. It says everything about the Green left takeover of modern Labor that Keneally gets parachuted into Western Sydney from Scotland Island. I mean, what's closer to Scotland Island, Cessnock or Cabramatta? If she's that good, with such a big profile, why isn't she being put to use in a key marginal seat or sent out to Hunter to try and hold coal country on the back of Fitzgibbon's departure? I think you and I both know the answer to that one. And it's not just Labor branches upset. Current colleagues too, like Tanya Plibersek and others, have declined to endorse the move, instead saying that Labor must improve ethnic diversity. Labor's Anne Ali saying the move to parachute Keneally into the seat is a huge failure on diversity. It would be deeply ironic, wouldn't it, were Anthony Albanese to fail to win next year's election because his hand-picked candidate couldn't hold the hitherto safe Labor seat of Fowler. But a local revolt is probably what's needed to to stop Labor treating its outer metropolitan seats like rotten boroughs to be traded in patronage deals like the British Tory party did before the Great Reform Bill? Why would Labor voters in the working class seat of Isaacs, for example, in Melbourne, keep electing Mark Dreyfus, who actually lives miles and miles away in the leafy streets of Josh Frydenberg's inner city seat? Fitzgibbon's own seat of Hunter could now be a problem for Albanese too. Fitzgibbon only just held on to the seat after a revolt from local miners who didn't like Labor, saying one thing to Green voters in the inner city and a different thing to traditional blue-collar heartland workers. These days, it's more often than not the Liberals who are the party of the blue-collar worker, leaving Labor to represent everyone who gets their money from government. For all the Liberal Party's lack of conviction sometimes in its own apparatchik class, rank and file members get a lot more say, and they're getting more say, not less, over candidates. And Liberal MPs are rarely carpetbaggers. Most of them have a connection or live in their seats. Justifying his departure, Joel Fitzgibbon declared mission accomplished because Labor, he said, had returned to the political centre. Now, I'm not so sure, especially with Albanese today saying that he wanted climate change to be one of the key concerns of the ANZUS alliance with the US. Scott Morrison won the 2019 election because he succeeded in raising doubts about whether you could trust Labor to manage the economy and national security. And I reckon today's changes have made it a lot easier for him to succeed here again.